you ever find that in moments when you need it most, the perfect information escapes you? So it so often goes in the tales of old. Maidens who have been warned since childhood of fairy circles find that information escapes them when the draw of such magic faces them head on. It is always in the moments of peril, when stories are the last thing on your mind, when they become the most crucial. And yet, this knowledge too will be forgotten in your moments of need, I assure you. And bear that in mind as I recount the tales of these lost souls. It is not their fault. It is simply the way things are sometimes. Out in the small harbour on the coast of Scotland stood a lighthouse. The village and the land around this harbour and lighthouse were rumoured to be rife with fairy magic. The trees and grasses were said to be full of fairy trickery, and it was on the villagers to tread lightly and carefully. The lighthouse had been cold for many years. The young lady only lived there still out of sentiment for her late husband. She tended to the structure and fixed the leaky roof, but the light in its chemical pool was a step too far. She was no recluse, however. She made her rounds of the village below her cliff daily, and was always to be found chatting to the sailors and stall-holders around the harbour. The young lads found her kind, and would often goad her for a kiss before they went, stating who knew if they would ever meet again. And it was then that her look would grow distant, and her face ashen. Every week the same. Every ship that left, every crew, no matter how small, would get the same warning. Trust no light from this harbour. Our lighthouse hasn't worked for years. The sea is full of tricks, and you must remember what I tell you now. They always vowed that they would, and they would board their ships and sail off towards the horizon. It is here, I'm afraid, the story becomes repetitive. I would love to tie this up with a happy ending, or an ending at all, but as such stories at this time of year tend to go, stories about lost souls don't tend to have a neat ending. And it is with that in mind that we shall continue. For ships would return under the cover of darkness, and in a place where the land is so full of magic, so too can be said for the sea. The waves would suddenly get choppy, and the wind suddenly roaring as if an ancient Greek sea monster was sucking them into a whirlpool. It was at that point one of the desperate sailors would spot the glinting lights from the land. Relieved, they would shout to their shipmates, and they would power towards the lights, all at once forgetting the warning of the young girl they had met as they set off. Up in the lighthouse, the woman would wake to a soft glimmer she had grown to know so well. She pulled a woolen shawl over her shoulders and followed the warm light from her bed to the door. She could see the trail of floating lights making their way up the cliff. She stopped, and they gathered around her. The shouts of the desperate sailors carried on the battering wind that tore at her thin nightdress. There was an almighty crack, and the ship was lost. Then, one by one, the little floating candles would disappear. Souls snuffed out beneath the waves. She allowed a single tear to fall down her cheek as the last sailor disappeared beneath the sea, before the wind died down and an ominous silence fell over the cliff tops again. She pulled the shawl tighter around her and went back to her bed and feared what new boats should arrive tomorrow. I told you there was no happy ending, didn't I? What could she have done but warn? Had they remembered, perhaps they would have been saved. And to any sailors braving that journey tonight of all nights, should listen very carefully. For on All Hallows' Eve the veil between the world of the dead and ours is thinner than usual, and it is not only the souls of the soon-to-die who venture to the cliffs, but all those who have come and gone before, and the light shines brighter than any other night of the year. And know that on this night there will be no one on the cliffs to cry for you, for on this night only does the woman stay inside and write a letter to her lover, the only light the glow of his corpse candle. her only light, the glow of his soul.